energy regulations stipulate that generation facilities of up to 100 megawatts don't need a license. They do, however, need to be registered with the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, that's NERSA. So the aim is, of course, adding more capacity to the grid to minimize load shedding. Let's unpack these new measures. We're joined this morning by Alexandra Falakis, who is a project finance lawyer. We'll also be joined by NERSA in just a moment. But Alexandra, good morning. It's great to see you. Let's start off the discussion with you while we wait for NERSA to log on to our call. The significance of these new measures from Eskom insofar as tackling the country's energy crisis is concerned, what stands out for you?
So, I mean, this really is a game changer for private generation projects in South Africa. So in December, Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act was amended. And what that amendment basically did is it now provides that any private generation facility that either provides electricity to an off-taker or buyer on a wheeling basis, or by connecting directly into that buyer's system, would not have to apply for and get a generation license from NERSA. And all these facilities would actually have to do is register with NERSA. So from an administrative perspective, in terms of getting these projects closed and into construction in the fastest way possible, this is a great move. Because if a generator had to actually apply for a generation license with NERSA, NERSA takes about 120 days to process that application, and there's also a public participation process attached to that. Now changing the requirement just to registration of the facility, NERSA processes that registration within 45 days of receiving the application. So it just really, supports the fact that electricity can come online as soon as possible.
Yeah, so basically we're getting rid of a lot of the red tape insofar as getting extra energy into the grid is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very interested to hear from Zingisa. I'm sure that since December there's been an influx of registration applications, and NERSA must be very busy.
Yeah, we're hoping to get that call going with NERSA as soon as possible. And once he comes online, we'll definitely put that question to him. So the qualifying criteria for Eskom to purchase this excess energy from a generation facility, what does that entail? Does that somewhat complicate things?
No, so I mean, I think that's also a great move by Eskom. So under Eskom's standard offer program and emergency program, Eskom's basically promoting private generation. Because in terms of those two programs that Eskom has launched, it's basically saying enter into bilaterals. As big industry in South Africa, heavy electricity users, enter into bilaterals with independent power producers. And if at any time there's energy that's exported into the grid by the independent power producer that you, as the sole off-taker, cannot consume or use at the time that it's exported into the grid, I will buy that electricity from you. So we didn't have that before. Eskom wouldn't buy that electricity from either the IPP or the buyer. That electricity effectively would have been lost. So the fact that you can now sell that to Eskom just builds the business case for these projects. So just promotes investability and bankability.
I'm just trying to understand the issue, Alexandra. So Eskom will have entered into an agreement with the off-taker. Is that right?
So Eskom can either enter into an agreement with the off-taker of the power or the independent power producer, so the generator of the power, and it would provide that I have a designated off-taker, which is, let's say, for example, a mining company. But to the extent that I've got excess energy that my facility is generating, that mining company cannot take, Eskom will buy it and will actually pay a tariff for that electricity.
And what is the potential here for excess megawatts into the grid? Like in an ideal world, how far can this go? It sounds like we could have a massive input into the grid.
So I think that it's important just to distinguish that if Eskom hadn't actually, put these programs in place, that electricity effectively would have still been exported into the grid. The only difference is that the IPP or the end buyer, end consumer, wasn't being paid for it. Now Eskom's saying, if it's in my grid, if it's in my grid and your end consumer isn't using it, I'll pay you for it. So it just promotes investability in these projects.
Well, Zingisa Mavuso has joined us, Alexandra. He's the executive manager for electricity regulation at NERSA. Zingisa, great to see you. Hopefully we can continue and include you in this discussion. So two major issues that have been addressed insofar as our load shedding crisis is concerned. Two big announcements. The one is the removal of that 100 megawatt licensing exemption threshold for private generation, and the other was the introduction of that emergency program where Eskom buys, exactly what Alexandra's been talking about, where Eskom buys surplus capacity from existing IPPs. From NERSA's standpoint, these are exciting new measures. All right, we apologize. We have been battling to get NERSA's standpoint insofar as this discussion is concerned. It seems that we can't connect with Zingisa this morning. It's a pity. But on the issue of NERSA, I was saving these questions for when NERSA was able to come on, Alexandra, but perhaps you can shed some light on it. What would be the role of NERSA, if any, in implementing this kind of industry reform, of ensuring take-up of these amendments?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, and NERSA's role as the regulator is to make it as seamless as possible. And they've signified their support to do that throughout the years as soon as this market became, deregulated. So definitely their role is to obviously process registration applications for these facilities as quickly as they can, and to obviously really educate the private sector in terms of what they need and what they expect in that registration application. NERSA has issued an updated registration application that streamlines what the requirements are. So, for example, previously applicants had to actually attach the power purchase agreement to their registration application. That is no longer the case. All the applicant has to do is provide the term of the PPA and the tariff that will be payable over the term of the PPA, as well as obviously notifying NERSA who the end buyer is. So the registration application will be very, very quick for the IPP to complete and then submit to NERSA. And then, then it's with NERSA to process those and issue them as soon as possible so that these facilities can achieve financial close, obtain their financing, and start construction.
Well, Zingisa Mavuso, let's try this again. NERSA's Executive Manager of Electricity Regulation, this time on the line to us. Zingisa, if you can hear us, the question I've just been asking Alexandra is around the role of NERSA in implementing these amendments to the Electricity Regulation Act. What would that entail?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Look,
Oh no, it appears that we're just unable to make this work. Zingisa, our connection to you is just, it's not stable enough for us to continue with this discussion. But let's wrap it up with you, Alexandra, this morning. You talked about Eskom paying for this excess electricity. Of course, the first thing comes to mind is Eskom's bloated debt bill in some 400 billion rand. So the question becomes, what will Eskom pay for this excess generation? Is that clarified yet?
It is clarified. So there's basically a static model where you know what your tariff will be for any kilowatt hour that's sold to Eskom, and then there's more of a variable model that basically is a comparison against Eskom's cost of generation. It's quite complicated to go through it in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
But effectively, Eskom would pay 59 cents for that electricity. I think it's important to say that obviously Eskom's ability to pay for that electricity is a key consideration for funders of these projects. But because the whole project isn't being banked on the back of Eskom, it isn't a fundamental hurdle.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. Alexandra, let me thank you for your time this morning, and apologies for our poor connection to NERSA and bringing NERSA's perspective into this discussion. But Alexandra Falakis is a project finance lawyer as we continue to unpack the new regulations, or rather amendments to regulations, insofar as getting extra generation capacity into the grid. Alexandra, thanks very much indeed for your time.